Hi, my name is Shereé Thomas. Welcome to my new YouTube channel. Now, I'm not new to YouTube. I've actually had a channel for 9 years now. However, this is my new book-related YouTube channel. My other channel is all about DIY fashion, sewing, beauty, and lifestyle. I wanted to have a dedicated book YouTube channel so that I could talk about all the things that I love to read and things that I want to read in the future. And I just felt like it didn't quite mesh with the content on my other channel. So I wanted to start a new community and hopefully connect with other readers out there that enjoy reading similar types of books as I do. A little bit about me: I am an early childhood educator. I have always worked with children in schools, but now I have my own childcare facility. And so that is what I do for my day-to-day work. And after work, I like to get lost in books. The type of books that I like horror books, I like fantasy, I like thriller and mystery, and a little bit of romance. I'm actually starting to get more into romance, whereas in previous years, I was not interested. And to be perfectly honest, the time of year that I really love a good romance is actually during the winter. So the whole month of December and even into January, February, I love a good romance. But for the rest of the year, I like all the other stuff. However, I will say this: I love fantasy, but I also love it when there's also a romance aspect to the fantasy. Now, in this video, it is October, okay? So this video is all about the spook, okay? I'm going to be talking to you about some of the spooky books that I've been reading or listening to on audiobook, as well as the books that I plan to read before the end of the month. It's pretty ambitious, my list, I'll be honest. But considering I completed 12 books last month in September, which I hope to do a video for you in the future to share with you those books, I think I can actually do it. And if I can't, it's okay. I can kind of roll those things over to the next month. Now, when we come to the number of books that I actually read in a month, it's generally about 4 to 5, depending on the number of pages in that book. But then I also listen to a lot of audiobooks as well. So when I'm sewing, I listen to audiobooks. When I'm cleaning, I listen to audiobooks, showering, folding laundry, all those things. Whenever my hands are busy, but I want to keep my mind stimulated, I put on an audiobook. So some of these things are audiobooks and some of them are actual books. I'm going to start by talking to you about the things that I read. I learned that Max was coming out with a reimagining of Salem's Lot by Stephen King. And it was supposed to come out on like October the 3rd or the 4th. I can't remember the date. So I definitely had to read Salem's Lot before the show aired because I absolutely love spooky movies during October. And I always know that the book is better than the movie or the show, but it's nice to have a little background before you get into the book or the movie. So I read this book, and this book was so good, okay? Stephen King has a special place in my heart, I won't lie, okay? The very first spooky book that I ever read, I was 12 or 13 years old, and it was It. That book had me terrified. And from that point on, I knew that Stephen King was the GOAT when it came to horror. He's also the GOAT when it comes to just eerie mysteries. And I really love the way he writes. I will say that a lot of his books are a bit wordy in the beginning. This one in particular, I almost gave up on. I'm not gonna lie. I almost gave up on it primarily because I read a lot at night. And sometimes I'm so tired, I start to drift. And the first like 300 pages of this book, honestly, was character development. And it talked to you about what the town was like, history of the town, things of that nature. So I was looking forward to being terrified. And I wanted to learn more about the spooky vampire that was supposed to be in this book. And I was starting to get frustrated because I was like 300 pages in. Okay, I get it. Like, I know all the neighbors now. I know every member of the town now. Give me some spook, okay, before I throw this book away. I was really starting to get frustrated. But after about 300 pages, things really kicked up. And there was a lot of stuff that happened in this book that tied into those 300 pages of just character development. Now, while reading this, I was annoyed. But when I watched the movie, I was irritated that none of that character development that's in this book was actually in the movie. The movie, in my opinion, was not very good. It was not very good. If you are a person who likes movies to be pretty much true to what happens in a book, that one is not for you, okay? I did learn, however, that there are 2 different mini-series that were based off of this book. And so I watched both of them because I'm crazy like that. I loved this book so much. I had to see that at least one of the 3 of these things gave it justice. And I will say that the old version that came out in the 70s was actually pretty good. But with both, or I will say with all 3 of the versions of the movie adaptations of this, they did something that I don't know if I love, and they combined characters. So for instance, they would combine 2 characters from the book into one person. So that kind of irritated me a little bit. And then another thing they would do is they would swap out storylines, and they just left a lot out. Now, obviously, you can't include every single thing in almost a 630-page book in a movie. But I will say that the older versions, the 1970s movie adaptation, and then the one that was done in 2004 with Rob Lowe, those were like 3 hours and something long total. So they were able to pack more of the details into those. I want to say that, and this is going to sound crazy, while the 70s versions was more true to the time period of the book, I actually enjoyed the newer version, the one that was from 2004, a little bit better. They were both done pretty well, but neither of them was as good as the book, obviously. And both of them changed the storyline a tad in order to, I guess, make it more of a well-wrapped package in a short amount of time. One thing I love about Stephen King's books is that he has such a wonderful way of writing about children, the imagination of children, the way children think, the playfulness between children, the innocence of children. And I will say that I always enjoy the characters that he writes from the child's perspective. I would say that if you really want to see a good example of that, definitely read the book It. But in this one of the main characters is a little boy, and he is amazing. I would say arguably he's my favorite character in this book. He is your typical boy, but he's also very brave. And some of the things that happen in this book with him made me just really crack up, even the spooky stuff, because I could close my eyes and imagine from all the little boys that I've worked with over the years, whether they be, from age 5 to age, 13 years old, he nailed it. Okay. The way this little kid thinks, the way he acted in this book, I could definitely see a little boy acting in that way, although this boy was extremely brave, I will say that. I don't want to give too much about this book away because it truly is an experience, but I do want to read the back of the cover. Ben Myers has returned to Jerusalem's Lot in the hopes that exploring the history of the Marston House, an old mansion long the subject of rumor and speculation, will help him to cast out his personal devils and provide inspiration for his new book. But when 2 young boys venture into the woods and only one returns alive, Mears begins to realize that something sinister is at work. In fact, his hometown is under siege from the forces of darkness, and only he, with a small group of allies, can hope to contain the evil that is growing within the borders of this small New England town. Guys, this is a really good book. Okay, if you want a good spooky Halloween read, I highly suggest this. And in my opinion, I say skip the movies altogether. All 3 of them, skip them. You don't need them. Just read the book. But definitely don't get too hyped up over the new version created by Max. Okay, let's move on to another Stephen King book that I read that I absolutely loved. Now, this is a mystery thriller, and I gave this one a 4-star. And I want to explain to you my rating system. A 5-star read is one that I thoroughly enjoyed and want to read again almost immediately after finishing it the first time around. Or at least I dedicated my mind that I'll probably read it every year. A 4-star read is one that I really enjoyed and I probably would read again, but it just wasn't one of those ones that I feel compelled to read it again just to see if I missed any details the first time I read it. You know what I'm saying? But it is one that I would enjoy reading again at some point. Now for Holly, it hit a number 4 for me because I found it to be really interesting. Again, with Stephen King books, there's lots of details about all the characters. You really start to feel as though you know these characters, like you grew up around them, like you just really are comfortable with each of the characters before the story even really kicks off. And with Holly, I feel like there's a new character introduced so frequently throughout the story that I almost had trouble keeping track on who is who. But it's a really good story about a detective she's a private detective named Holly. And she is investigating a disappearance of a young woman. The young woman's mother actually reported her missing, and the police did what they could. But at the end of the day, they basically chalked it up to, we don't know what happened to her. Good luck, right? On your own. They gave up on her. And so the mom hires Holly to take over the case. Now, I'm going to give you a spoiler, but it is something that you learn within the first couple chapters of the book, so it's not something that is going to necessarily ruin the story for you. This is probably one of the best Stephen King twists that I've read in a book, and that is that the monsters, or they're not monsters, but modern day version of a monster, the serial killers in this book, because yes, there is serial killers, are elderly people. 2 old people, a married couple that are professors in a university. Okay, this definitely reminded me that old people can be evil too. Okay, no matter how cute they are, no matter how friendly they can be, old people are just older versions of young people. So if somebody's a serial killer in their 20s, they could grow and continue to be a serial killer when they're middle-aged and older, okay? So this was one of those books that creeped me out enough to where I had to sit down with my kids and talk to them about talking to strangers again. Now, I have those kids that are very helpful, and I had to say to them, you need to be more cautious about your environment than helping an older person. You can call and get them help from an adult, okay? Because these 2 old people creeped me out, okay? So basically, from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, you know who the serial killers are. And the whole time you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, they're really getting away with this because they're old and they're professors, they're friendly in the community. Like, these guys are just getting away with it, and more people keep disappearing, and no one is suspecting this old couple. So I just thought that was fantastic. I had never read anything like that, and I really enjoyed the premise and storyline behind this book. It was so well done. I will say that both in Holly as well as in Salem's Lot, there was some language that kind of got under my skin. There was some homophobic language, and that kind of bothered me. And then also in the book Holly, there was a lot of use of Black N-word, right? I am Afro-Latina. I do not appreciate when people talk about Black people, period, okay? But there is a racist couple in this book that talks bad about a Black woman in particular, and I felt a kind of way about that. And sometimes I feel like authors take advantage of the fact that they can get away with saying certain things because they're telling a story, and it kind of bothered me a little bit. So that's also another reason why I gave it a 4 instead of a 5. And to someone else, they may think, oh, well, they're just writing about a racist character. But I think you can write about a racist character without necessarily going so far deep into that. And I almost felt like it was kind of like his opportunity to say Black B, you know what the B stands for, more than once. Like, one time would have been fine, okay? And the person they were talking about was actually a kind person, a good person. So yeah, that was the only thing that kind of bothered me about that book. But again, such a really good story, and I gave it a 4-star because yes, I could see myself reading this again, but no, it's not one that I felt compelled to read again right away. But really good story, thoroughly enjoyed that story. Now, right now, I'm currently listening to the audiobook, and I believe it's called Bleeds. If It Bleeds, let me pull it up so I can tell you exactly. But I'm listening to it on Libby. If you're not familiar with Libby, Libby is an app that you can link to your local libraries, and you have access to Audible books. So this is what it looks like. You could just play it and listen to it, or you can get digital books and you can either read it on your phone or transfer the book to your Kindle, which I also love to do. I'm a big Kindle reader, and it makes things so much easier to be able to access books that you would normally be able to go and get from your library, but literally download it within 2 seconds and not have to leave your home to go get the book. So I really love that. This book is called If It Bleeds, and I'm enjoying this actually. I didn't realize that this was a book of short stories until I started listening to it, and then it switched stories on me and I became very confused. But the first story that I listened to was Mr. Harrigan's Phone, and there was actually a movie about this. And I watched the movie a couple of years ago, I believe, and I thought it was a pretty good movie. But typically I'm disappointed by like movie adaptations of books, especially Stephen King books. I will say though, I enjoyed both versions of it. The old school version and also the newer version. I thought those were both scary and a really good time. But for Mr. Harrigan's Phone, it was just okay. I wasn't like blown away by it. The story itself is creepy. It's definitely a good time listening to it. But now I've moved on in the book to the life of Chuck. And so it sounds like it's the end of times in this story. So yeah, I don't know. It might creep me out a little bit too much. But I will say that with Mr. Harrigan's Phone, it was creepy in the sense that this little boy becomes friends with an older gentleman who's very sick and he's dying, and he's basically hired this boy to come over and read to him. And they develop a friendship over some years, and then the old man passes away. And during the time when they were friends, the little boy buys him a cell phone. It's when the first iPhone came out. And so they bond over this gift that he's given him. And when the old man dies, he buries the phone in the man's pocket in his jacket. So he's buried with the phone. And I don't want to give away everything that happens, but the boy ends up calling the phone because he misses him. They've developed this friendship and he's a young boy, and he misses him. So he just wants to hear his voice on the voicemail. Anyways, he calls the phone and leaves a voicemail telling him he misses him and all this. The next morning, he gets a text message from the phone that's been buried, okay? And then it snowballs from there. Things happen from there. So it's creepy. It's a good time for Halloween. I'm hoping that the life of Chuck doesn't creep me out too much because it's an end of times type of story. But that's as far as I've gotten into this book. But it's something that I'm continuing to listen to as I do my daily chores. Now we're going to move on to a vampire story I wish I hadn't read. Now, first I want to say one thing. I don't typically like to give poor ratings to books by Black authors because I like to promote them. A lot of times those books don't get out there. They don't get a lot of attention. So when I talk about a Black author's book, I really love to be able to say positive things, or I just don't say anything at all. This one, though, I feel like I have to mention it because there is there should be some type of warning going into this book, especially if you're a person that works with children, adores children, loves children. Like, this might creep you out a bit. Now, the author of this book has written some amazing other pieces of art, okay? But this particular book was not for me. This is called Fledgling, and it's by Octavia Butler. Now, this book is gorgeous. Look at the artwork on this book. I even have a hard time looking at the author's picture because I feel so bad about what I'm about to say about this book because it's not kind. But anyways, the box is beautiful and it looks just like the actual book that the box goes into. I was immediately drawn to the artwork on this book. I love Black art, but also a good story about Black characters. And I hadn't read too many stories about Black vampires, so I was truly thrilled to read a spooky Black vampire story. Now, the thing I didn't like about this story is that the main character is actually supposed to be in her 50s, but she is in a body that to the human eye looks like maybe an 11-year-old child. So underdeveloped, no breast, no pubic hair. Like, it looks like a child. However, she's supposed to be within her vampire society. She's supposed to be in her 50s, okay? But to the human eye, she's a child. What I didn't like about that is that there is a lot of sexual content in this book. Now, they don't deeply describe the sex that's being had, but it is mentioned several times in the book that this vampire is having sex with an adult human. And it just gave me the ick. It grossed me out. I couldn't get over it. It was hard for me to stay engaged with the storyline because it kept bringing in these relationships with this tiny vampire and these adult, full-grown humans. It just grossed me out. I couldn't get into it. And I couldn't get past it, okay? Also, I love a good spooky vampire book that has action, that's got me scared and anxious and nervous for what's going to happen next. Like, for instance, when I was reading Salem's Lot, there was a couple of points that I literally had to turn on the hall light to go to the short distance to my bathroom because I was scared, okay? Like, I like to be spooked, okay? This was boring. I did not enjoy this at all. Like, there was no action. There was no... These vampires were very different, let's just say, than every other vampire that I've ever read about or watched in a movie. It was a very unique take on vampires. So kudos to her for that. But I did not enjoy this story at all. And not only was there a lot of sex being had between this main character and human adults, but the adult vampires were also lusting after this childlike vampire. That grossed me out. I just could not get past it. It was hard for me to focus on the story. It was boring in a lot of parts because there is a situation in which the main character's family has been slaughtered, like her whole entire family. And so they think they know who's responsible for the murder of her family, and there's a whole trial. And these people are basically on trial for the murder of her family. And it's just so boring. It was so boring. And when it comes to my vampire stories, I definitely like to be scared. I like the sexy romance, but I like everything to be like adults. You know what I'm saying? Like, that just creeped me out so bad. And as a mom and also an educator of children, I don't like things like that. Like, I don't even like to read anything that has a ton of childhood trauma in it because it breaks my heart. But I couldn't get past the fact, even though this vampire was supposed to be 52 years old, even though I knew that from the human eye, and it said it several times, how tiny she was, how she looked like a child, I just couldn't get over the fact that human adults wanted to be intimate with her. It grossed me out. I couldn't read it again. That being said, although this author who has passed on was an amazing, talented author, this book was not for me. I rated it a 2. I will never read it. I will never recommend it to anyone. And I probably won't talk about it again after this video. If you don't agree with my comments, I do apologize. Different people, different strokes for different folks. Is that the phrase? Okay, so that was another one that I read. I also read the original Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, this is something that I find to be a yearly type of read. I enjoy it so much that I definitely revisit year after year, always during spooky season or during fall. It is just a very classic telling of a vampire. And you get eerie, you get spooked, you know. I love that it's an old-timey type of story. And because I enjoy reading it this time around, I also read in tandem with the audiobook. And the cool thing about the audiobook on Audible is that the people have accents, so it brings a little extra to the story than just reading it on your own, because I don't know about you, but I'm not good at doing out accents when I speak to people, or even like in my imagination, accents just never turn out right. So to be able to listen to an audiobook about Dracula with all the different accents was pretty cool. I have actually watched the Bram Stoker Dracula movie, and just like every other movie adaptation of a book, it's different. The storyline is different. From the beginning to the end, there's this love story. It kind of like adds romanticism to the monster, whereas Bram Stoker's actual Dracula book, he's a monster through and through. And it's just such a great story. If you like vampires, if you've never ever listened to or read Dracula, you need to read it. It's a good story, especially if you like vampires. Now, I heard from another YouTuber about Carmella by Joseph Sheridan LaFane. I don't know if that's correct. My handwriting is a mess, okay? Anyway, I had never actually read or listened to this book before, but after hearing that person talk about it, I was like, okay, I'm here for it. But apparently this story was written in 1872, and it was what inspired Bram Stoker to write Dracula. So Dracula was based off of this story, and I found that to be really, really interesting. Now, there was a mini series, I want to say it was on Showtime, and it was called Penny Dreadful. Oh my gosh, I love that series. If you're looking for something spooky to watch, that is a good one. I actually might watch that tonight, or at least start it. It was a series. Anyway, in Penny Dreadful, there is a story about Van Helsing, and he is on the hunt for Dracula, and he's also trying to rescue his niece. And I think that story that's in Penny Dreadful is actually pulled from Carmella. But Carmella is a really wonderful vampire story that actually the vampire is a woman, not a regular like Dracula character. And she is obsessed and in love with a main character in the story. And as the story goes along, you find she's trying to seduce her, and eventually she wants to turn her into a vampire like her. It is just such a really good spooky story. Also, not only have I read this, I listened to the audiobook because I enjoyed it that much. It's good. It's worth a listen to if you don't have time to read it, but it is a short story. So if you like vampires and you've never read or listened to that, definitely get on it. It's a good one. Another spooky vampire. Yes, I love vampires. I don't know what to tell you. Another extremely, I want to say I gave Carmella a 5-star if that wasn't obvious. Another extremely spooky story is Suffer the Child by Craig Dilouie. I'm probably saying his name wrong, but I will link it in the information section below. This story creeped me to my core. It creeped me to my core, and let me tell you why. Much like I don't typically do scary books relating to children, when it comes to like trauma, I also don't necessarily do child monsters because I work with children. I love children, and they spook me a little bit different than your average monster, okay? In this story, I'm going to give you an idea of what it's about. There is a world tragedy that happens where on one specific day, all the children in the world drop dead. Out of nowhere, out of the blue, it's Christmas time. It's like the week of Christmas, and all the little children drop dead. I mean, when I tell you I was spooked, okay? And then later, they raise from the dead. Literally. Like, so imagine this. Mass graves are being dug because there's so many dead children that they can't have small burial plots. They literally dig huge mass graves for all the children to be put into one mass grave. And on that day that they're put into the mass graves, I'm talking some of these children have already been buried. They start rising from the dead. It creeped me out so bad. It was so good. This was a 5-star read. This is one that I will read every year because it creeped me so bad. Now, it definitely is one of those stories that is slow paced. It's not like action. It's more eerie than anything, because when the children first come back, they seem like their old selves. So the parents are like, oh my God, you're back. They're so excited. They're happy. They're not scared. They're not running from their kids. They're just so incredibly happy that their children are back, right? But quickly, they start to realize that something's not the same about their kids. Their kids are different. One being, their children will not eat. They will not eat food, okay? And so I don't want to give you too much. You already know this is a vampire story. But what I will say to you is that it definitely begs the question, how far would you go for your children? Yep. I definitely had to question myself, how far would I go for my children, right? So it was definitely a really good book. And also this is available on Audible as well. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. So good. All right, let's talk about the books. There's one last book that I'm actually working on. I'm reading it right now. I gotta be honest with you. It's totally losing my interest. And I don't know if it's just because I'm picking the wrong time of day to read or what. But this is Dowry Blood by S.T. Gibson. And this book right here is another vampire story. And this one, it sounds as though it is about the brides of Dracula. And so far, it's told from the perspective of Constanta. I think that's how you say her name. And she is just, it starts out that she's writing a letter. And I think she's writing the letter. I don't know if it's Dracula or just some other vampire, but she's talking about her relationship over the years with this person. And it sounds as though she may have killed him, but I'm very close to the beginning of the book, only 27 pages in, so I can't give you too many details, but I'm working on this one right now, and hopefully I can return to the channel and tell you exactly what I thought about it and if it is worth a read. But it's definitely one that has been recommended, and I was extremely excited to read it. So hopefully it turns out to be worth the read. Now I want to share with you the books that I hope to read before the end of this month, or even leading into the beginning of November. The first book is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I was drawn to the cover of this book because the main character appears to be Black, and also the author is Black. Also, I know this is about witches, and I don't have too many witch books in my collection, so I thought it would be fun to give this one a read. The next one that I picked up is The Immortal Dark. I believe this is a dark academia, and it is about vampires. That is what I think. And it's also by a Black author, Tigest, Girma. Hopefully I said that correctly. Really beautiful book. I love the art on the side of the book. It's just really nice to look at. It says, "No soul can enter without an invitation." Really gorgeous book. So hopefully those two are really good. I also have another Stephen King book. This one is new. It just came out. This is You Like It Darker, and it is a compilation of short stories, which I've been having so much good luck with Stephen King novels lately, so I'm really excited to read this one. And then lastly, I have a book that's called, I have it in a book cover. Let me take it out. This book is called Crave by Tracy Wolff, and I believe this is a vampire story. I don't know much about it, but you know I love me some vampire stories. So I hope to read these 4 books, as well as finish the Audible book that I talked to you about, the Stephen King book with the short stories that I talked about. And yeah, these are all the things that I'm going to be reading over these next few weeks. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please do hit subscribe and revisit me on this channel so that you can find out what I've been buying and also what I thought about these books that I just will have finished. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a fantastic day and a wonderful week. Talk to you soon. Bye.